Hey there, what's up? It's me, AZODi, and yeah, it has been a long time. A long time would actually be an understatement. How have you been? What have you been up to? Really humbled, but got my first K-pop cut after 5 years. It's with Kimwoojin on his latest album, The Moment Bounce. The song is actually the title track for the album called On My Way. And in this video, I wanted to give you a rough production overview of what I implemented for this song. So the track was co-written by myself and the immensely skilled producer Phil Schwan. The top line was covered by the immensely skilled writers Avenue 52 and Square. I'll drop links in the description box below for you to check out all their works. If you would like a bunch of tools for your own K-pop productions, check out the link below to the Gumroad. I'd really appreciate it if you could go support Kimwoojin and the 10X team by watching the music video and streaming it where possible. Let's dive in. I started this song back in early 2020 before all the chaos ensued. I would call this genre pop punk. It's very close to my heart as I used to write a lot of pop punk in my old band years and years ago. I would say the genre overall doesn't really change too much, especially at its core. It's a lot more of an emphasis on the guitars and vocal and arrangement side. And this tutorial will spend a good amount of time on the guitars, the arrangement and the production. The way I started this entire song was to pretty much just strum a few chords on this handy acoustic guitar. There's nothing really special about how I chose the chords or whatnot. Like any guitarist, you kind of play around, find a chord progression that you like, and then you run with it. I'm no different. That's exactly what I did with this song. One thing I would recommend is to try and convey emotion with the chords. For example, I wanted hype, energetic, fun, carefree. It was written in a major key. I dived in here and I transposed all of the guitar chords into Cubase's chord track, as you can see here. If you haven't before or you're unaware how to do that, all you need to do is right click here and it should just be there, but it's been grayed out because I've done it already. The reason I did this was so that I've always got a reference point. I can see what's going on the screen. The thing is with pop punk, a lot of it is written with power chords, which is the root note and the fifth. And I just wanted to add a bit more of a diverse sound palette when it came to the chords. So for example, instead of just going E, A flat, A, whatever, I was added the seventh here. So we've got an A flat dominant. And then added an A minor, and then we repeat it again. But in the ending, we ended up modulating / jumping out a key to a C chord and a D chord majors. That's pretty much it for the chords in the chorus. With the verse, there was nothing special, just a standard 4-chord pattern, just to kind of make it feel different. And then of course repeat, and then when we get to the pre-chorus, I add a little bit more kind of flavor, change the chords up again. There's not really that much more regarding the arrangement side of the song. Let's move on to more of the guitar production, MIDI design, I guess you would call it. Fun fact about this song, there is not a single live guitar played. It is 100% programmed MIDI. But hear me out, there are definitely pros and cons to this. The MIDI VST that I used is Impact Soundworks Shreddage II. If you're working on a very small budget or don't have a lot, I would highly recommend grabbing some guitar MIDI VST stuff. There's a lot you can do with that and a few amp sims. All right, so this is one of the guitars. Have a listen. Cool, so as you can see with the MIDI here, it is very dependent on how you control the velocities down here. So for example, the lower that you play it, the more it's going to feel like a quiet note or a palm mute. Generally a palm mute is when you apply pressure from your palm onto the strings to choke them, and then the more you raise the velocity down here so it starts hitting the reds, it's more going to be like a strummed open chord. At the end of the day, if you know what you want to hear, that's the main thing. If you are a guitarist, absolutely that will help massively. You can really transfer a lot of your writing style and personality into this. If you want to have a wide, big stereo sound, you have to do a thing called double tracking. As you open up Shreddage here and you've got the double track, you could say, right, guitar 1 is going to be on the left, guitar 2 is going to be on the right, and then guitar 3 and 4, we'll get onto that in a bit. The way I like to approach it is to have the power chord on the left, power chord on the right, and then what I call is the real chords on the left and a real chord or advanced on the right. And what I do is, instead of having the palm mute 3 chord, I use the full chord here. So you can see there's a lot more strings being played, and it kind of really conveys the chord that I want. So if you have a listen, you've got the power chord by itself. Stereo. Let's add these in. Okay, so let's dive into the processing of the power chord versus the open intricate chord here. Let's turn these all off. Yeah, let's start with Neural DSP's Tim Henson from Polyphia's amp here, which I absolutely love. So just out of the gate, I haven't done anything. This is a preset called Anarchy. Just have a listen to that. Sounds great already, you know. Next thing, EQ. Right, guitar EQ. Okay, so basic thing with guitar EQ is you kind of want to roll off a lot of the low end and leave a lot of room for the bass guitar to sit. Generally, I'm doing it from 64, maybe 75, maybe go up to 85 on the low end, but that's kind of generally how I have it. Then I try and pull a little bit of the interfering with the bass. So what I've done is I've notched out around 130 to 140, because when the bass guitar comes in, that's normally where the natural bass guitar frequency is going to sit, around 140, maybe up to 200, maybe a little bit under 140, but I kind of had that. Then I took a bit of the low, mid, mud and boxiness in guitars. You get them around 250, 300. A lot of like the kind of mid instruments kind of deal with that, don't they? Now what I've done is I rolled off quite a bit off the top end in the air here. The reason being, right, is you've got to always bear in mind that when you're doing pop stuff and when it's all about the vocal, guitars are occupying generally the same frequency as a vocal, and they often battle with each other. So you always got to make that kind of decision as a mix engineer. What's the priority and who's going to be sacrificed in regarding to EQ? So always with the guitars, I'm always going to kind of roll them down a little bit just in case of the vocal, and leave all that nice top end for vocals and, you know, probably some sort of like crashes, cymbals, hi-hats, but it depends on the genre and style. I also admittedly was kind of doing this knowing it was going to get altered later on as well. So now this is something I like to do with a multiband compressor, is to apply multiband compression around these sort of frequencies, which is 133, which we saw earlier, and 250. Reason being is because this guitar has palm muting. When you palm mute a guitar, low mid end of the guitar comes out, and you want it, but it can get a little bit wild and out, and especially with real guitars, you're going to find this a lot more than the program guitars. So what I like to do is just apply a little bit of multiband compression around that sort of low mid frequency range, a little bit of compression, reduce the gain a bit. Look at that. So it's working. And then you can see it kind of calms down when I strum. So that's a great technique. So that is kind of the basic of how I would approach the palm muting and the power chord side of a guitar processing. So it's always important when you're blending two guitars to have different sounds, playing style, EQ. You don't want everything to sound too similar, and it kind of adds a much more diverse, richer sound overall. So what I've done is use a different preset from the Tim Henson amp here, a little bit more of a cleaner one. So the big thing I would say with this, now as I mentioned earlier, you want the clarity of the notes to come out a lot more. So with that in mind, you generally find yourself having to turn down gain, overdrive, general distortion, because if I was to turn this up, let's turn that for you. It just becomes cuts through, but it's adding a lot of like noise, fuzz, and kind of, it's just really annoying. You lose the clarity of the notes. That is basically the signal processing for how I approach the chords. So the way that I approach ear candy in this particular song, let's go back to the verse, is if you look at it in 4 blocks, I tend to add a little bit more of the variation towards the end of the chord progression, just in case people get a little bit bored. So let's have a listen to the riff. Then, to show development to the second part of the verse, I do it again, but check out what happens here. We've only just done the octave. So all I've done, bumped it all up 1 octave, and then it just shows like a new way of developing the idea. Originally opened it up as we had this riff here. So as you can see here, combination of palm muting, and then I start to ramp up the volume to show, yet again, that's the way I play guitar. Palm mute and then gradually just raise the volume louder and louder, and this kind of creates natural sort of like a ramping effect, but also anticipation. Okay, so let's have a listen to the solo. This is such a form of self-expression for guitarists. Like, they're very personal to guitarists. So for me, yet again, I just thought this sounded cool. It got me hyped, got me excited. Then if you play them together, you can see that they're all harmonized with each other with a third. Third harmonies in guitar solos and general guitar riffs is very popular. You hear a lot in classic metal and rock in the 70s and 80s, but it works with most genres, to be honest, like we're doing it with pop punk or K-pop punk, right? What I did with this is take the original solo, bumped it up a third. Some notes go out of tune, or out of key, sorry. So you want to keep a keen ear and kind of move them accordingly, but the majority of it works. Yeah, and that's kind of it. That's cool. All I did is went up and down the scale. As you can see, I implemented some triplets into the mix here. Yeah, again, just a stylistic decision. I just thought it sounded cool. And then tremolos. And that's generally it for the riffs. So when I mentioned another pro to having Guitar MIDI was once the song was actually cut and 10x had confirmed it, they asked for a couple of changes on our end. The first one was just to slow down the BPM by a few BPM. Absolutely fine, that was easy. And then they ended up halving the verse 2 because we had a rap section in, but they took that out. And then the most important thing was, because this was written in E major, they requested to dip it down 3 semitones to C sharp major. If you have a MIDI guitar, all you have to do is highlight everything and push 3 down on the keyboard, right? If we recorded all of this with live guitars, we would have to re-record the entire song again with a real quick turnaround because they needed it quickly. So that is one massive perk that played into our favor later on, was just being able to move everything down. We dodged a bullet there, let's put it that way. Thing as well, what did I do here? But I just kind of mashed my hand on the organ and just kind of did it like that. I think I got the idea from listening to a lot of J-pop, and specifically years ago, if you guys know AKB48, kind of threw it in sitting underneath the guitars, and they provide nice padding, a bit of stereo width. And then if you dive in, I'm just sustaining the chords. Can you hear that it's got a nice stereo field, like it's kind of like got the panning going on, which sounds great as well. So when I approached the drum writing was to keep trying to convey that feeling that I was doing in the guitars of fun, energy, excitement. There wasn't really too much more than that, in all honesty, just making sure that the drums were relevant to the section that was being played. But yeah, let's have a listen. This is the intro, but also it will count as the chorus beat as well. As mentioned before, was written about 3.5 years ago. I've since then updated a lot of my drum libraries. So what I'll do is dive into a couple that I purchased that I use for all my productions now. So this is the pop punk kit that I use from Get Good Drums. Sounds absolutely amazing. Very, very reasonably priced. I think around $40 to $50. Also comes with like pre-written grooves like this. So if you need a quick idea, you can just drag it into your MIDI and start going. So this is the one that I used. I guess like general rule of thumb is to make sure that everything is full blown for the chorus, and then for the verse, I think we just did a simple kick pattern and some hats. And then it picks up. So second half of the verse, to show development, what we can do is once the beat's picked up, you've got the hi-hat, but then halfway through we go from a real kind of tight closed hi-hat, and then it opens up even further at the end. So that's a cool way of kind of raising the anticipation and hype. That's more of a crash, but you get the idea, right? So that's one cool technique if you want to have a live drum sound. For the pre-chorus, it's pretty much the same. This kick is locking in with the chord progression here real tightly. Can you hear that? And then we jump into the chorus, and it's the same as before, but a lot more splashy. And then to show development for the repeat, kicks don't fall to the floor. And then for the verse 2 variation, halftime beat, just to kind of switch it up. Beat in the solo is the same as the pre-chorus, but one thing to do the final chorus to show variation is I like to do that kind of snare kick pattern that you hear in a lot in pop punk. And then yeah. And that is pretty much it. Yeah, again, as I keep saying, I knew that this was going to get mixed by an external party, so I didn't put too much emphasis on the mix with that. But in regards to arrangement and writing, I think the main thing is just to keep the emotion going throughout every instrument. Always have the feeling you want to convey in the back of your mind. Make sure you bring the energy down for the verses, have a bit of variation for your pre-chorus, and maybe like a repeat of a chorus. But that's pretty much, verse 2 rap if you wanted to go ahead with that. Generally, that's it with drums. So just for the sake of this video, I just want to touch upon the bass VST that I would use in this sort of production today. So if you jump in here, we have got from Ample Sounds, the punk bass. I have never been so excited about buying a plugin before, but this is one of the greatest bass guitar plugins I think I've ever heard. It just works straight out the gate. Again, barely have to touch anything. To me, this sounds exactly the sort of bass tone that you want in a pop punk track. I think it's vague. It's modeled on the Mark Hoppus bass, the P bass from Blink-182. I quickly wrote out a part to have a listen. So that's the DI. Straight out the gate, nothing on it. And then we turn it on. Love it. And then we can change the channel. So it's a choice of something a bit more dirtier and distorted, or a bit more of a little bit of grit and then completely clean. When you're playing bass guitar, you're using a thing called pedal notes. All that is playing the strummed pattern that a guitarist would, but on a single root note. So all I've done quickly is rooted out all the chords here. Now, if I was to be a bit more intricate and a bit more interesting, maybe I'll have a few kind of flicks or like embellishment in the bass line towards the end of like bar 2 and bar 4. Let me just show you my quick bass preset signal chain for this. So if we go into the EQ here, I've taken a lot of the top end, just the brightness of it. We kind of want the kick drum to cover this frequency. Don't really worry too much about sub with this bass guitar. You always have to make that decision as a mix engineer. Is it the kick or the bass that's going to carry the sub? 130, 140, all the way up to about 200-ish. That's where the natural bass frequency would shine. Always mix in context to everything else. And then listen to the low end of the bass. How it kind of, you see how when I turn it on, it kind of jumps a bit forward and it's much more prominent. A bit of boxiness, low, mid, mud, get rid of that. And then this is kind of where I like to hear where the string is getting hit by the plectrum. With compression, nothing wild at all. Just smoothing out the top and the lows, kind of compressing it, kind of keeping it smooth. A lot of the times with these VST plugins, because it's not live bass, it's different. With these plugins, generally there's quite a bit of processing done, so you don't have to do anything too dramatic with this. And that's pretty much it. There's a few options here that I have the virtual mix rack, so yeah, adding a bit of channel, color. And that's it for the bass. Once all those elements were written and arranged, tidied it up and sent it off to Phil to add the bass, mix, and extra elements as well. Then after that, it moved on to Avenue 52 Square Music for the top line and final master. Let me know if you learned anything cool or interesting, or if you had any questions, let me know in the comment box below. Like and subscribe, and if you haven't already, make sure to join the K-pop producer Discord community as we hang out, give a lot of feedback on music production, talk K-pop, all that good stuff. Make sure to watch the music video and stream the track to help support Kim Woojin and the 10X team. And thanks so much for watching. Catch you again soon.